Welcome everybody to the Tridion Docs 1502 Bootcamp. This session is about Content Manager and OpenAPI. My name is Ivo van der Lagemaat, and together with Andriy Zhidko, we will present this bootcamp. The agenda for the session is basically what is in the box, a little bit about the platform support and the platform components. We are going to tell you about how to install it and how to do the upgrade. We make some general improvements, and on the Content Manager side, we were going to talk about it. There's a new component there for the preview, compare, and validate. It replaces the old one. Some topics about the OpenAPI, something about the quality, how do we do it, and how good is the quality, and then we finalize with is deploy and is remote. Platform support. So if you look at the support lifecycle of products, every other products besides Tridion Docs also have a support cycle that normally is about a couple of years, sometimes a little bit longer, a little bit less. But we adopt the life cycle of an LTS and an like long-term support, and we've also like a short-term support. The long-term support is about 3 years, and the short-term support is about 2 years. So you can also see the different products also have their support cycles as well, and sometimes they overlap to make the upgrades easier as well for next version of a product. If you focus a bit more on Tridion Docs, they can actually see the life cycle on the of the Tridion Docs different versions, and you see that the majority of them are already retired and out of support. And like the 14 SP4, that is actually ended support end of December last year. So 14 is the whole 14 version of Tridion Docs is no longer supported, and that means that we only support version 15. And we already list 15.1, but you also notice that we also released service or updates as well. So currently there's all 15.1.2. And hopefully in June, we're going to release this version 15.02, and that will get support for 3 years. Like it's an LTS version, so it will be supported till June 2028. We'll look a little at the products, what we're going to introduce. So we introduce more of the OpenAPI. Before we more or less made it publicly available already, but yeah, you could not do all the integration that you would like to do. And still the OpenAPI is not fully featured compared to the SOAP service, but we think it's complete for 90-95%. And the majority of your integrations can actually be migrated now to the OpenAPI. And the deprecation is still like the secure token servers, the STS, and also our SOAP web service as well, and especially with the authentication scheme with the WS Trust and WS Federation that is still on the list to be deprecated in a future version of Tridion Docs. If you look at the different components that also Tridion Docs is using and for hosting and connecting to third-party applications, the main difference, actually they're mostly the same as the previous version. There's one difference is Windows Server. We now have support for Windows 2025 that actually came out or released end of last year. So we have full support of Windows 2025 for Tridion Docs 15.02. And Windows 2022 is also supported, and that means that we drop support for Windows 2019 in 15.02. So we only support the 2 major versions of Windows Server. If you look at SQL Server, nothing is changed. So we still support SQL Server 2022 and SQL Server 2019. The same is there for Oracle as well. So we only support Oracle 19c. There is already like Oracle 23 AI, but it's not for on-premise installations. In the version that we use for validating that is working is not released yet by Oracle, and we don't give support for it yet. They have TMS, there's nothing changed, and also for World Server and Trados Enterprise, we still support the same versions from them. For the .NET framework, also nothing's changed. We're still going to support .NET 8. You need a hosting bundle if you want to install it on your Windows server. And .NET Framework 4.8 is still required as well to run Tridion Docs 15.02. For Java, also nothing's changed. We're still supporting Java 21 and the Java 17. It can either be coming from on-prem itself or from the Eclipse version, as long as it's like the version 21 of version 17. For the browsers, also nothing's changed. We're still supporting Microsoft Edge, Chrome, and Firefox. And the old ones from Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer, we still don't support them. Yeah, we're not going to support them anymore. Solar, we did an upgrade to a newer version, so we now support Solar 970 behind the scenes. So you probably notice as well. So every time we now actually upgrade Solar with every release, before we didn't do it, and sometimes we make a very big jump, and it's hard to do those big jumps as well. It also sometimes contains vulnerability as well, and that's why we also want to move with Solar as well with the rest of the platform, like .NET, Java, and SQL Server, for example. If you look for the quick start for the configuration, we also have those XML settings. Sometimes we also call the NTFIU files. And we have two new ones. This is one for the event system, or for the events, actually, they can what's in organized space. And there is a new one as well for translation jobs. And by default now, if you do a new installation or an upgrade, we actually submit during the upgrade a default value for those events. So for the events, we have a nicely configuration there. This out of the box is working. You still can change this, but it no longer require you after an installation to actually upload NTFIU files. It is what is in there, but we live out of the box is also in this in your upgraded version as well. And of course, you can modify it after once you upload it. You can actually modify it in organized space. But yeah, you don't need first do everything yourself. If you want to make a change in NTFIU files, you can immediately go to organized space and change it. You see what is there. The same applies basically for translation jobs. The only difference is that we have a very good out-of-the-box value for it, but it is commented out. And the reason for it is that it totally depends on workflows. And workflows are customizable. And for that, for that reason, it is very hard to come up with one with out-of-the-box that works for everybody. This one gives a good indication which sections they are and what you need to fill in. So also you have a little the feeling what you should fill in. So like I said, out of the box is there, but you need to change it to your needs. But yeah, like I said, you don't need those NTFIU files first do it there and then use is remote, for example, to upload it. It's now there when you do an upgrade. For the platform components, there's one new component added to the whole list, and that is one for external space. We call it the SES, and that is a specific web application. And it's not a module anymore, like before. It's now a separate web application. I will come back to later in this presentation. And when you have a new web application, it also means you have also a new application pool as well. For the rest of the service is actually, it remains the same. So we still have the STS, the SID, access management, draft space, review space, organized space, and the extensions for organized space. So this all remains the same. And yeah, this one is CM then for XAPI. This it still is there. We still have the SOAP service and also the SOAP service for more authentication, the OpenAPI, the metrics, and the last one that you actually see here is the external space. That's used also for preview and for validate. That is its own application pool as well, as you see. For the architecture, yeah, nothing has changed in that sense. It's still high available and still stateless. And yeah, the number of databases remains the same. It's still 5 databases. And if you look at the platform support, here you can actually see which components or which version of .NET. So you have .NET 4.8 and .NET 8, and all the brownish ones are we actually migrated now to .NET 8, and the blue ones are still written in .NET 4.8. It's basically full framework, and they will still have to be migrated or they will disappear over time. And there's one new one is on top of the list that is actually ES, that is external space, added to the list. Now I would like to hand it over to Andriy, and he's going to talk about the installation and upgrade.
Thank you, Ivo. So let me walk you through the installation upgrade procedure. So First, I would like to start with an issue that few customers experience, and that you might also experience that issue in your environment. So when you're opening output tab of Publication Manager, during that action, an exception is thrown, like electronic document type is not initialized and list remains empty. Another symptom that you might seen that during the publish process it fails to upload the status report with an exception that the field value, the name of that field, cannot be returned because it is not initialized. There are also a couple of other symptoms in the organized space. When you're selecting a topic and then property panel is initializing and sending the request to retrieve the language object, and this request is failing with exception that the language object doesn't exist. Another example of the same symptom issue so the symptom for the same issue is that when you are trying to preview the revision, it is failing with revision doesn't exist exception. So if you're experiencing some such issues, such exceptions on your environment, you'll be happy to know that in Tridion Docs 15.2 we did address the root cause of this issue. And to prevent this issue in the future, as part of the upgrade process to 15.2 version, database consistency should be validated for MS SQL Server databases before the upgrade starts. So we did introduce extra check scripts that should be run before the upgrade to Tridion Docs 15.2 to validate the customer database consistency. So this script is executed at the beginning of the database upgrade tool and reports all the problematic entries in case they are found by the script. And these problematic entries should be addressed before the database upgrade will proceed. And there are helper scripts that will help you to address these issues, and I will cover that scripts and that cases on the next slide. As I mentioned, this script is executed in the beginning of database upgrade tool, but we do recommend to manually upfront, even on earlier versions and earlier releases, to run the script before executing the database upgrade tool. You can find this script on the CD layout and execute it manually and validate the results. So in case issues were reported, there are a set of correction scripts that should help you to manually fix this issues case by case. So there are a couple of issues that might be reported. One of them is in case you are missing the blob for publication output. In this case, there is a separate script initialize incomplete publication output, this one. So you need to execute it manually, and it will restore the initial situation by creating an empty blob and enable a republish for that publication output. Another case that might appear in the report is that you are missing a blob of publish report. For this situation, there is a separate script also on CD layout that is called ish delete incomplete publish report. So you need to execute it manually, and it will restore the initial situation by removing the electronic document and enable a republish, and hence a report will be available as a result of that. Another use case is that you might be missing previous revision, and for this case there is a separate helper script that is called delete incomplete previous revisions. So it should be also executed manually, and it will remove previous incomplete revisions. There also might be a case that you will be missing current revisions of the document object. In this case, it requires a manual action from the user since it requires a context knowledge about the content. And there are a couple of options that user can choose from. They can upload a blob from the local storage. They can restore a previous revision, or they can remove the version. So in general, before installation or upgrade, process includes, like, if you are doing a new installation, you need to first restore your content manager database from the backups. You need to create databases with PowerShell scripts for access management, for a backend for frontend, for identity provider, and for metrics database. If you are upgrading from Tridion Docs 15.0, where we didn't have metrics feature yet, so you will need to upgrade content manager database using the database upgrade tool. You will need to upgrade access management database with PowerShell scripts, and you will need to create metrics database with PowerShell scripts. Be able to use metrics feature, because the metrics feature is mandatory. Database installation is a mandatory one. If you're upgrading from the previous Tridion Docs 15.1 version, where metrics feature was already available, you will need to upgrade your content manager database with database upgrade tool. You will need to upgrade access management with PowerShell scripts. And you will need to upgrade metrics database with PowerShell scripts. As Ivo mentioned, you need to install .NET 8.0 hosting bundle, so make sure that you do install that. And database upgrades are supported from 12.0.4 version. So the list of databases remains the same as it was in 15.1 version. So ish.cm, the main database with the content for the content manager, ish.am for access management component that hosts identity providers, API resources, user claims, ish.id that is stores the Tridion Docs identity provider data, and ish.bff that is used for backend for frontend part of the product. So all these three are part of the modern authentication initiative that was introduced as part of Tridion Docs 15.0 version. And ishmt, this is the database that was introduced as part of 15.1 version, and it stores data that is required for metrics report. So it also remains the same in 15.2. So, so this information is more for the database administrators. In 15.2 version, SQL Server database users per each database remain the same as they were in previous version. The same deployment database users as well as same runtime database users. The same situation with the Oracle database. Required installation tool parameters for 15.2 hasn't changed, so they remain the same as they were in 15.1 version. Let me walk you through some improvements on the Content Manager side, and first I will start with the change tracker configuration. So change checker is used to configure comparison between two XML files. The configuration for the change tracker is available via the organized space using XML settings area and change tracker entry. You also can change the configuration of it via the local file. The location is mentioned on the slide. So what we did, we included a CID attribute to the list of ignored attributes. It was there already before for the preview section. Now we also include it into the publish section. Some changes for write and delete plugins. So a bit of context. So write plugins for annotation replies, they are supported starting from Tridion Docs 15.0. Write plugins can add a background task to the event queue, and once you are creating or updating the object, the business code reads this event queue and creates the necessary background tasks. This was not the case for replies, and in context of Tridion Docs 15.2, we did a fix, and now business code properly process annotation and replies. And as a result of that change, the out-of-the-box on-object change sent event plugin, it is fixed and it creates a background task for replies. So there is an example configuration of the slide as a reference that can be used to create a background task for reply. As part of the HCD, in the resources folder, we have a zip file with a solution that holds a set of plugin examples that can be used as a starting point to develop your custom or write plugins. Now it also has an example for delete plugins that were initially introduced as part of 15.1 version to support the metrics feature. So you can use that example to develop your custom delete plugins as a starting point. Some changes for the metrics feature. First, a bit of the context to understand what the new stored procedure as part of the database cleanup job does. So when the object is removed from the content manager storage, then it also set as expired in the metrics storage as part of the synchronization process between content manager and metrics storage. These expired objects are they are included into reuse and ROI calculations. This is done to reflect the state of the system for auditing reasons. But we do introduce a new stored procedure that cleanups objects in the metrics storage that are expired for 5 years or more. And this stored procedure is executed as part of the database cleanup job. Moving on. As part of the translation job feature, we did introduce a set of change on the business layer that affects both public APIs behavior, WCF SOAP and OpenAPI. So let me walk you through the list of the changes. So there were read access and write access parameters on the database job. Sorry, database and translation job. So we did remove this write access and read access parameters from the create method on the business layer, as they were not used before. But for backward compatibility and to not break the existing calls against API 2.5, these parameters are accepted, but they are not passed to the business method anymore. As part of the enhancement, as part of the enhancing translation jobs feature, we also introduced a new field that allows you to limit object types that can be selected, and as a result can be only that object can be added as a source object to the translation job. So this object might be map topic, library topic, image, and other. Source objects that are added to translation job must be of specified types. So for example, if you did create a translation job with selected topic and library topic, you will not be able to add maps as a source object to that translation job. There is also change for the image object type. So if image is selected in the list of selected object types, you need to pass the resolution. So it is a change comparing to previous behavior, where if the image is selected and no resolution is specified, then all resolutions are selected. Now it is not the case anymore. If image is specified, you need to specify the resolution. To handle the legacy case when the new field fish translation job types was not present there, when it is not specified, then all types by default is selected. But this also means that if they are all selected, then image is selected, and it means that you need to specify a resolution. As I said, this is business layer changes, and as a result, both OpenAPI and API 2.5 are affected by these changes. More business layer changes. So previously, a lot of these changes that I will mention, the validation for them was done in the ASP.NET code of the translation job feature. So it was done on the UI side. Now the validation rules are moved to the business layer, and so both public APIs, WCF, and OpenAPI will benefit from this change. So now we are validating the selected language workflow combination that is available in the template that it chose. For the fish translation job type field, there is a logic that if you did set this field, then we check that this value matches the selected template as well. If you didn't set this field, then we will set it automatically with the right value using the corresponding template type. For the fish translation job alias, the logic is the same. If it is set, we are validating that it matches the value from the selected template. If you didn't set that, we will set it automatically and using the corresponding template alias. Fish translation job source language should be aligned with the source language on the translation template. And again, just a reminder that these changes are done on the business layer, and both APIs, OpenAPI and API 2.5, are affected by these changes. Some improvements for background task service. Up to 15.1 version and earlier, after starting the background task service, it will work with static and memory copy of background task configuration that is loaded from the XML settings area. There are cases when configuration for different handlers requires adjustment. Just to mention a couple of examples. For example, you need to reduce or increase the execution timeout of the publish action, or you need to reduce or increase the number of publish actions that happen in parallel. So once the change to the handler is done via XML settings area, it requires a restart of all involved background task services on all the servers. This is how it was before. So as part of the Tridion Docs 15.2, we do introduce refresh handler definition that is used during the execution of the background task. So before executing the background task service, it retrieves the latest background task configuration from the database. But please note that the configuration is still cached for 1 minute. It is done to prevent loading on configurations that might be at this point of time not fully updated. And during the background task execution, we use the same handler definition that was read before the execution started. So if you are changing the handler configuration during the execution of the background task, these changes will not affect the current execution. So as part of the handler configuration, you are specifying, so like you can see example here. So as part of handler configuration, you specify the sleep period for a puller. So if no background tasks are available to process, it means that if configuration for handler has been updated, it will be picked up at the beginning of the next loop. So in our example on the slide, it is minimally 10 minutes. So it is also important to mention that the changes to the is enable. So this property for the handler still requires a restart of the background task service. So if you didn't use the handler before and decided to use it, you need still to restart the background task service. There were also some crawler improvements. So we did increase the throughput for crawler service by optimizing a couple of scenarios when we are processing the delete action for the last language of the object that has one version. When we are processing the delete action for logical object that has multiple language objects, and we also did optimize the update action when language object is marked for deletion. So there were throughput issues that were throwing out of memory exceptions when crawler service was handling large amount of content objects, 5,000 or more. So these issues are now resolved. And with this, I would like to hand over to Ivo.
Thank you, Andriy. I will continue with the list of values. So for the list of values management, if you want to delete a list of value, it can take a lot of time because we try to figure out all the items that are using this particular LFV value. And what we now do as an improvement, we actually stop the whole deleting process as soon as we detect the first instance of a value that is in use. So we have a faster way of returning it, saying, hey, it is in use, you cannot delete it. We also, if you look at the log files, we also improved the logging a little bit. It will give you some more details, what was actually going, what with the details of the object preventing the deletion. We also did hopefully as well. So sometimes you have indeed situations that is used for a lot of items there and those values, and yeah, it can take a considered amount of time waiting for the response. So hopefully this will indeed give a more responsive system in the end. There's also an issue with the list of values. You can actually set it. So sometimes you can set basically the element of the value. And if you set an element of value in API 25, you also have to specify the value type, what it is. And in the OpenAPI, we basically only allow the element name, not the value. But there were situations that it was working. So you actually set on the OpenAPI, you set the value, but we actually should use the element, but we set the value. And on the API, we set basically the value, but we didn't look at what was the value type, was the element of the value. And it was caused by the fact that we cache LFV values. And if you find it in the cache, we basically ignore the whole is value the type of the OpenAPI. We did not check it if it was really the element name. So that could be result in unpredictable results. So sometimes the request was working, and the next time you did it, like 10 minutes later, it wasn't working anymore, or half hour later. So now we improved it. So now we always check it basically. So if you use the OpenAPI, if you set the LFV value, it should be the element name. And if you use the API 25 or the SOAP web service, you basically have to make sure that the value type corresponds basically with the string that you're passing in. So if you use the element, you should use the element name. If you use the value, you should do the value. So that also could mean, in theory, that it could break your integration API. But you should have. It's more like a bug on our side than it's actually. And yeah, that explained that sometimes it's working, sometimes not. So hopefully it doesn't break your integration. But if you see something that is not working anymore, it could be related maybe to this change. And this is also in the how it should be working in the first place. So it was a bug on our side. Access management. So for access management, there was a cookie lifetime. So once you logged in on access management, you actually with the federation would send to your identity provider, you log in, and then access management knew who you are, and we cached that information for about 10 hours or for 10 hours. And that was hard coded. It was not configurable. And in 15.2, we make it configurable. So you can actually set it to any time you would like it to be. And by default, we make it 8 hours. And once the cookie expires, then you are actually forced to your identity provider to log in. We try to come up with a table that gives you an overview of the authentication lifetime about our applications. If we look at the bottom, you actually see the Tridion Docs web applications. That's draw space, organize space, review space, but also now external space as well. Come back to that one later. So if you the first time if you log in, you basically go to access management will send you to your identity provider and all the way back, and hence you're authenticated and logged into the application. If you look for our web applications, we basically do it via cookie authentication, and that cookie by default on the organized space, draw space, review space is a sliding expiration, and the expiration time is 1 hour. That is the default in 15.1 and it remains in 15.2. But you can change it. You can also change it. Hey, you don't want a sliding expiration, set it to false, and the expiration time is set to maybe half an hour. What that means, as soon as the cookie expires, you are forced to go to access management. And then access management gonna look at, hey, there's also a cookie. Is that one is not expired? Then you still automatically are logged in, and hence you have access back to your application like organized space, draw space. So in 15.1, You have the unconfigurable value for the access manager for 10 hours. Like on the previous slide I mentioned, we now make it configurable and we set it basically to 8 hours. And you can actually override it with the user session lifetime to whatever you need. So if that cookie also expires, you basically go to your identity provider. And on identity provider, it just depends on what the kind of entity provider you're using. If you're using the built-in like SID, it's unconfigurable and it's also 10 hours. And for us, no plans to change it either. Because also like a built-in identity provider does not support multi-factor authentication. It is easy to set up and to work with, to have a bootstrap of a running system. But as soon as it's working, you should actually integrate it with your identity provider of your company to have a really like single sign-on experience. So that also means if you do something like Microsoft Entra, you have to look at the Microsoft documentation. How can you do the exploration, basically, and forcing users to log in, and also how to set up multi-factor authentication. So hopefully this gives you some kind of an overview how the authentication lifetime across the products and different components is working. For access management, if you want to add a new identity provider, there's also in the list, in the properties, there's a separator you filled in, and currently it is always empty. That means if you are adding multiple identity providers and leave this the separator out, then it could mean that you could end up with duplicate subjects. And if we do an account lookup and we found a subject on multiple identity providers, we just don't know which one we should use in order to give some more information about the account. And that's why it's always there already, a separator. And that actually make it really specific, that subject to your identity provider. And with the key in the separator, with the subject that is basically always unique, and hence we can find it. So an example, I tried, purely Bootcamp is Bootcamp is the normal subject, but if you set the separator as a colon, it will be SID/purely Bootcamp if SID is your IDP key. This is basically the screen I was talking about. So now, if you add a new identity provider, by default, you get basically a column there to actually distinguish between different identity providers. You also have to be aware of it if you're going to change it like this. For example, Bootcamp to SID Bootcamp. You also have to look at your users in organized space, let's say the Tridion Docs CM site, that in the external ID, it should actually map, because that is how we map users from access management, let's say, into our Tridion Docs users. So if you add a separator or with it, just change it. And if the user already exists, it works. But as soon as you delete the user and you create basically a new user in access management, it will have this like IDP key separator, and you have to update your external ID of those users. But I think for default, it is better to have a default. If you add a new one, it has a separator. It will prevent you use some nasty exceptions, and you don't know where to look at or how to fix it. And this is preventing it to happen. We also noticed that sometimes you can do mappings in access management. We give access to applications in Tridion Docs for, let's say, for organized space or draft space, depending on a group or role from your identity provider. And the majority of the identity providers always give you your groups or your roles back, and you can actually do the mapping. There are actually identity providers that actually you have to supply them with additional scopes. And now we have also the option in access management to actually define those additional scopes. In this example, they are just called groups and favorites. And if you pass them to this identity provider, it will turn you to which groups you are part of, but also the favorites. And hence you can also use on the IDP configuration in access management, give certain users that are part of a group access to, for example, let's say organized space or draft space. Something about the API performance. During our organized space preview feature. I'll like I said, come back to that one later. We also noticed some performance, not issues, but we saw opportunities to improve it, because in the preview we're gonna make a lot of small requests in order to give you the best preview. And what does it mean? So every item that we actually retrieve, and we do a lot of the OpenAPI, it will actually validate that user if they have a certain access. So we do the authentication bit on access management, but we still have to authorize the user if they have access to this particular item. And that is done in the code. So if we hit a request, you know the user, but then we have to find with authorization, does this user have access to it? Can you do certain stuff? Yes or no? And that is something we have to do on every request. And with the preview, we make a lot of requests for handling the preview. It depends a little bit how big the preview is and what it contains. Does it contain a lot of conrefs? Then, of course, you add more and more requests to it. But they're sometimes relatively small. And then if you look at the overhead for the authorization, it can be, not large, but it can be a significant amount of time. So what we are trying to do is actually, can we not cache it for a certain amount of time that we don't have to do this whole authorization bit, and hence improve the performance a little bit as well. So I try to draw it a little bit. So in Tridion Docs 15.0 and 15.1, we have the authorize bit. It's done written in red. They can actually see it takes a certain amount of time, but also the time is fixed. It's always a certain amount, a certain time that it takes. But also the waiting for the response from the server, that's the one above, that varies a bit. It depends on the request. So if you ask for a folder, the items in a folder, there can be like 2 items in a folder, but it can also be 100 items in a folder. So for 100 items in a folder, that takes longer than the 2 items, and hence the authorization improvement impact, you don't see that much on those large requests for large server responses, basically. So, and in 15.2, we actually cache it then for 10 seconds, and then we have a smaller or a faster response. Also, because we do the caching, it also reduces the CPU cycles on the server and also the request to the database, hence an overall improvement on the utilization. We can actually do a higher utilization of our server, handling more requests in the end. So do you really see it in the end in our applications? It really depends a bit. We know like draft space, for example, makes a lot of small requests in order to load it, especially the first request. But yeah, do you really see it? Hopefully you do. But yeah, like I said, it's on our side also we do less CPU cycles, less calls to the database, hence we can actually handle more requests as well. So that's the improvement that we made. Yeah, like I said, so we'll cache the user for about 10 seconds. It's not sliding anyway. It's fixed 10 seconds. And after that, we actually load the user again. It has effects based on the OpenAPI collector spaces and also the client tools over SOAP. But if you don't like this setting, you can actually use a registry key, the tries of info-share forced authentication refresh. The default is false, so that means they're caching the user, but you can also set it to true, and then it will behave the same as the previous versions, 15.1 and earlier. The MVC XAPI dependencies. So this is basically the OpenAPI that or XAPI OpenAPI that we currently are having with, like is remote, the client tools, and is remote. They're working on OpenAPI, our WCF layers as well. And if you look at the 15.0, we actually tried also introduce organized space. And with organized space, we are in a hybrid situation currently. We have like we're doing the OpenAPI that will drive organized space. It makes a lot of requests for getting lists of what items are in the folder. But you notice that we still have some legacy pages in the beginning. Like we still have the preview in 15.1, but before we also have user groups, and they were also using basically this XAPI layer for retrieving this kind of information. And we also have like draft space, review space that using XAPI for collected spaces. But like I said, so we have, you're right, so indeed we have XAPI for collected spaces, but we have the MVC for organized space. And for 15.2, we're actually removing the complete dependency from organized space to XAPI and our MVC for organized space and also the foundation on the server. It's not needed anymore for organized space. So organized space is now only using the OpenAPI for retrieving all its information. Field definitions. So we have a couple of new XML settings. They are for the event configuration, but also for the translation job configuration as well. So there are 2 new fields in the database. For the translation job, there are also 3 new fields. It's for the fish translation job items. And it uses on a translation job to indicate which object types should be sent to the translation. And it also has a new list of values as well. That's also added to the database. Then we have a new field for the fish translation object reference. And then a fish translation job targeted languages. So those 3 fields are added to the content manager. We also updated 2 fields. So we have the fish status type. That one is now mandatory. Before it was not mandatory. And also Andriy already tried to explain it, that we also try to set it correctly as well during the upgrade. And we have the fish translation job retranslation. And that is now set to non-mandatory. So that is the change for those 2 fields. We also updated a couple of field descriptions as well to make it more clear what they actually mean and what they contain. Now we're going to enter a new section. So that is the preview, compare, and validate. That is something new in this version, and it will replace the old preview, compare, and external preview and validate like it was in 15.1. We're going to start with the preview and compare the content of document objects in organized space. So historically, we have 2 implementations. The first implementation was with the client tool, which is written in .NET framework, and it also has dependencies in WinForms. And WinForms we could not actually use in the old web client. And organized spaces currently uses the .NET framework, hence the old web client technologies, in order to do the preview. So we have some SRQs that some people are mentioning, hey, it works like this in the old web client or organized space, and it works differently in the client tools. Why is that? And yeah, because we have 2 implementations, and over time they actually deviated a little bit. So that is a good one that we actually start creating a new one for the preview and compare. And also one of our objectives in the long term as well to actually move to .NET and get rid of .NET framework. So that means for all the components on the server, you should actually move to .NET. So for that, we actually created a new .NET library for the preview and compare. This one can actually be shared across organized space and client tools, but for now it is only available in organized space. So how do we actually fix it? So I said we have a module that's called the preview compare module, and that is part of a controller, and that is hosted inside organized space. So organized space is also like a web application, and in the web application we actually inserted this module with the preview, and all the requests from organized space regarding the preview are sent to this controller. And that controller works with the same authentication mechanism that is currently done in organized space. So in organized space, we actually have that backend for front-end approach. So the client always sends basically a cookie. If the cookie is not there, you basically go to access management and identity provider and you need to log in. It also has a big advantage as well, because like the preview, we return like HTML, and HTML can contain a link to an image, and hence we also need to resolve that image as well. And this can now be done in a secure way. And also the preview also contains some CSS and JavaScript, and also returned from the server as a static file. When we hit a preview, we don't send the whole content, but basically an identifier of the item you want to preview. And with that, we hit basically the preview compare module, and the module asks the OpenAPI, give me the content of this item, this topic, for example. It will get it. It will get the XSLT and what is needed to make the transformation for that XML to HTML. And those ones are basically shared with the client tool. So we really try to do the same approach that we did before in the previous versions. All the XSLTs, XSS, and JavaScript files that are actually shared between the client tools and organized space. So, like I said, so the organized space, the authentication bit, uses based on the session cookie, like the backend for front-end approach. So it does not work with bearer tokens. So the preview and compare module is basically that same kind of functionality that the current OpenAPI is. It's basically a RESTful service. And this preview and compare module is also a RESTful service. It has endpoints. You can also make a strongly typed client from it and try to communicate with it and do the preview. But like I said, it does not use authentication or bearer tokens. It only works with cookies in organized space. So this is basically the endpoints that we currently have. So you can actually do it on a language card or logical ID on revision, and also the compare as well. So the preview endpoints are not available in OpenAPI. They're only living here in the organized space, and the only authentication is with cookies. This is a screenshot how it's going to work, the preview in organized space. And this is basically the compare functionality as an example. For the preview and compare, we try to make some improvements. So we do now some resolving the link text. So the navigation titles are not be resolved because it just takes too much time. We had a look at it to see if we could make it faster, but we just didn't find an easy way to make it faster. So we didn't do it. So but it is actually the same behavior as in the previous versions. Now we're going to go to the preview and validate document objects content for external applications. In the previous versions of Tridion Docs, there was external preview. And the main use case was for translators to do a preview of their translated content with the Tridion Docs style sheets. So before you have your topic, and then you have to do some kind of base64 encode the content basically, and then send it to Tridion Docs. And then we can actually generate the preview, and hence the translator could see how it's going to look like the translation with our style sheets. The validate, it's more or less the same approach. So you have the content of, for example, a topic in XML, and then you have to base64 encode it, and then send it to the Tridion Docs server, and then do the validate, and then you can actually see if it was successful or not. So the validate is used for validating the content against the DTD, and it's mainly used for translation systems. Just before submitting it, just check it if it's really valid according to this DTD. Otherwise, it will block translation organizer, the synchronization process, because it contains invalid content. Just to prevent this happening, so actually the translation systems can do the validate on our side to checking it against the DTD. So we also made a new version of the external preview and validate. Like I said, we would like to upgrade all our technologies to .NET, and also the previous preview, external preview and validate was anonymous. You have to configure it, basically which user you want to actually run it under. So on the translation system or translation did not have to provide any credentials, and hence they can actually see the preview and validate. But it was anonymous, so everybody could use it. And if you now look at the current world, like anonymous access is not really taken to secure anymore, and people or companies start asking questions. Hey, why is this one open? Everybody can see my content. I would like to protect it. So now it is protected. So we're using access management for this one, and specifically those service accounts. So the translators are still not required to have a Tridion Docs account. And what we need to do is when we're making the request for the preview of validate, we have to actually send the is client ID and is secret ID as a header to the preview or validate endpoint. And those client ID and client secret, like I said, are coming from a service account in access management. So by default, it is always working, it's always on this external preview and validate, but it requires now authentication. So customers need to update their triggers to our preview and validate endpoints because they're different now, and there's no, it's not compatible because now it requires authentication. Also, we have some OpenAPI. It's also like a RESTful endpoint. So for this one, you can actually create your own strongly typed model if you like, and actually call to validate the preview as well, and then it will generate a nice preview. Like I said, you have to set the is client ID and is client secret headers, and also the content as a body multipart. You have to send it, and then you can actually see the result. If you look a bit more into the mechanism, it looks a bit more advanced that we currently had with the preview in organized space. Now we have the external preview. Because we don't have the cookie yet to start with, we have to provide something to start with, and we send basically the client ID, client secret always. It's part of the headers, so the is client ID and is client secret header. Once we actually send it, we try to validate that one with access management. And if it's not successful, you get basically an access denied. If it's true, then you get the access token. And then with the access token, we go to we create something, we call the backend for frontend approach. We create basically a session or unique ID, and we store basically the token itself in the database. And then we're gonna use the OpenAPI to get some content there for making the preview ready. And also we have the same XSLT used for the client tools for the preview, but also for organized space is basically the same one. We do the max with XSLT, and we send the result as an HTML paste with a session cookie to the user. So when this preview contains a link to an image, for example, the browser makes a request again to our preview and compare module in external space, but then it sends also the authentication cookie we just got from the preview. And hence you authenticate it with that cookie. You can figure out in the backend from the database, hey, I have this session ID which access token does belong to it, and then we can make a good request on the OpenAPI to get the image from Content Manager. And then, of course, if there are other kind of style sheets as well, part of the preview, it also makes a request to the static file handler, and we deliver basically all the CSS or JavaScripts that are part of the preview. For the validate, if you look at it, it's a bit different because we only do the validate. So we only need the client ID, client secret. We validate it with access management. You get access token, and we check if we can actually validate the content according to the doc types as well. Like we have the DTTs basically if it's valid, and then we actually return the response to you if it was successful, yes or no. But this one also required the session is client ID and is client secret as in the header for the authentication. That also means with the external preview, it's not like a module inside organized space. It's a new web application, and yeah, it's a new structure in a folder on disk as well on the web with InfoShare ES, and also as a default website, you see it like external space is ES as a web application there as well. And yeah, there's also like an application pool as well configured. But yeah, how to set it up basically, because I was saying you need a service account in access management. So in access management, you can actually create a service account, you can give it a name, but then you also need to give it access to Tridion Docs Content Manager API, because the access to the OpenAPI is needed to perform the external preview or the validate. And once you created the user, you also should create a client secret as well. And with that combination, you can actually make the request, but also don't forget, if you actually create a service account, also add it to your user, to an external ID of a user in Tridion Docs. And that is why you can also limit it as well. So you don't have to give it access to your whole repository based on your roles and groups. You can actually do certain, you can have access to certain parts of the Tridion Docs Content Manager. So you can also, like I said, limit the access to the repository. We also delivered a test page as well. It's not like the translators should do it, should use it. Customers should actually create their own page for the external preview and external validate, but we actually create this to verify that it is working, and it can also make it easy for customer support as well to do some investigation and also to test it for the integration implementation as well for the customers that are creating their own page. And we have indeed one for the preview, and we also have one for the validate as well. They're basically into one page. Now I'll try to give a short demo indeed about the preview. So here is the organized space. Hopefully everything is still loaded. So we're using a system, a test system that is not used that much, or not a lot of users are accessing currently. It also means like all the application pools are shut down after 20 minutes. And if you want to give a demo, then it needs to warm up for making the first request. And that sometimes can take a while, because your one servers will talk to another servers, will talk to other servers, and it will take a while to start those services. And at one point, I hope that is there, and you see a cookie expired, like I said before. So if your cookie expires, you fall back basically to access management. With access management, I have that cookie there, and hence I'm authenticated again, and I can use organized space. So this is, for example, a map, and with the map you can also do a preview, and it will the map, and it also contains the links, and with the links you can actually click on it and it will do the preview of that particular topic. And then you can also have like the compare functionality as well. And also in the next session for organized space on the bootcamp, there will be more explanations on the preview as well. But yeah, we also have support for images as well as in the preview. So that's like a short demo on the preview, but we also have like external space, and I will try to do the whole start to finish, how to set it up basically. So in the organized space, you can actually enter this test page. If you use ECS, you will enter it. Like I said, it also has a web application. It also needs to start. And once it's actually finished starting, you will get a nice test page. You can actually press already the submit and see what is happening there behind the scenes, but then it already gives you some kind of indication. Hey, you need an is client ID and is client secret header set as well and some content. So hopefully I already still have some content or not. Maybe I'll try to enter some content. I can still submit it, but still I need the client ID, client secret. If I type in something wrong, it does not exist. It will exit content access management in order to validate it, but it said access is denied. So that probably also means that we actually need to go to access management. On the service account, and here you can actually create a new service account. But this one, I call it like external preview. External preview of your name. This client ID can be anything you would like, but yeah, this is easy for me to copy paste it. And I need access to Tridion Docs Content Manager API. Then I save it. And then, like I said, I need also like a client secret. So this is my client secret. And then I can actually build in here. And also this was some external preview. Then I do submit. And then I get a 403 response. And 403 means forbidden. And like I told in the on the slides, you also need to have a user mapped to the service account. So if I go into settings and go to users, then I already created a user, external preview and validate. And this one, if I edit, here's the external ID. I called it external preview. Do a save. And then if I make the request again, then it will succeed and will try to do I should have a page there. Try to hit it again. Yeah, there. Oh, it took a while, but yeah, they can actually see the page. It also contains images as well. It has a link to image. It will be displayed it nicely as well. So this is for the preview. We also have the validate, and with the validate, it just validates it against the DTT. Then you say it is successful. But if you now, for example, remove the title and say submit and validate, then you can actually see that hey, the element title is expected. Yeah, this is it for the short demo. And then I would like to hand it over back to Andriy about the OpenAPI.
Yes. Okay, so let me find the correct slide. Yes, so let me continue with OpenAPI. So yeah, a quick reminder why we did choose OpenAPI as a standard for Tridion Docs OpenAPI. So the OpenAPI specification allows describing the REST APIs in standard programming language agnostic way. It makes it possible for both humans and computers to discover and understand the capabilities of the service, either using a Swagger UI or a spec.json file. We are describing our
API using the OpenAPI specification that allows to generate the client libraries in the various programming languages, making it easy to communicate with our API, and it also gives implementers the possibility to focus on their implementation. We are the first early adopters of our public API. Tridion Docs OpenAPI is not an exception, and it is used by our organized space. Organized space was one of the drivers for RESTful OpenAPI and continue driving this initiative with the new features. So as part of 15.2 version, we did cover new methods for a different set of classes. So for example, annotation class was fully covered, and now it has a parity with SOAP API. It has various new methods for create, update, delete, get annotation and reply, get annotation list methods. Background task was enhanced with new methods, and the background task class enables integrations with third-party applications. New methods were added for the baseline class, as well as some updates were done. For example, for get baseline list, we added selected property to be aligned with other endpoints, and the default value for it has changed. Complete baseline was enhanced with new property to persist the baseline, and it is used in the implicit baseline update feature from the draft space that you can see on the separate during the separate demo for the client tools and collective spaces. So more new baseline class endpoints. Document object class was finalized to have a parity with WCF SOAP. So more methods are mentioned as well. Event class was completed with the last endpoint that was still required due to HTOS link. Overview of folder class that is finalized in previous release and has a full parity with WCF SOAP API. Inbox, list of values, data binding classes overview that are also finalized in previous release. My object and put formats finalized also in previous release and have a full parity with WCF SOAP API. Two new endpoints that are used as HTOS links are added to finalize the project class. Project class is used by Publication Hub and is available only in OpenAPI. Publication class was finalized with remaining endpoints. What has been changed to release publication is now raises an exception when freeze step is failing. This is the difference between 15.1 and 15.2. New search in publication endpoint was added to publication class. Search and settings endpoints were finalized in previous release. Although in previous API 2.5 search in publication was part of the search class, for OpenAPI, as I mentioned on previous slide, it was added to publication controller. Endpoints that are used in enhanced translation job feature, this feature will be demoed on the separate organized space bootcamp that I encourage you to attend. So this is the overview of that endpoints that were added in as part of 15.2. User groups and roles classes were finalized in 15.1 version. Users and workflow endpoints are not changed in 15.2. They are the same as in 15.1. So these slides shows the current state of the OpenAPI parity against SOAP. And as you can see from this slide, we have only 10 remaining endpoints to meet the parity, and all of them are planned for the next release. That means that in next release, that is coming after Tridion Docs 15.2, we will meet the parity with SOAP API fully, and we encourage you to use OpenAPI in custom implementations and for professional services and customer support. Please communicate this also to customers during discussions that you are having with them. So let's also cover documentation for OpenAPI, since it's important puzzle when you are either starting using it or migrating from the deprecated APIs. So documentation for OpenAPI is available in two places: on our documentation center and on AWS developers website. The read-only Swagger UI and OpenAPI spec files are hosted on our developers AWS website. A root topic that we have for API references in our documentation portal has a reference to the developers AWS.com, to this read-only Swagger UI and the spec file, as well as developers AWS.com has a link to the root entry to Tridion Docs API landing page in our documentation center. Web services API references on documentation portal has 3 root nodes. There are common concepts across APIs that this section describes important concepts you must understand before you are starting using web services APIs. Information specific to web services 2.5 and conceptual information for latest and greatest web services 3.0. There is also a compatibility overview topic across releases. So it allows you to quickly see which OpenAPI calls replace which web services 2.5 API calls in these tables for different classes. And this enables easier migration for custom code from SOAP WCF to OpenAPI. There is also a section that explains model notification for both OpenAPI and deprecated SOAP WCF. There are also different topics that has code samples on how to generate the client library in C# using OpenAPI specification file, as well as how to use that generated client to make the call to Tridion Docs OpenAPI using OpenID Connect and client credentials flow. To learn more about Tridion Docs on API, so I do recommend to read a blog that was written as part of the 15.1 set of bootcamps, and also watch a recording of the extensive session that we had there. So this is the first link. As part of that session, Ivo did a live coding session on how to develop custom web application using Tridion Docs on OpenAPI. So you can take a look on that using this link. There is also another blog that has useful documentation links to learn more about OpenAPI and has a sample application as a starting point that is using auto-generated client and has a code samples that allows you to connect to the Tridion Docs or OpenAPI. So this is this link. And with this, I would like to hand over back to Ivo.
Thank you, Andriy. The last section indeed of this bootcamp session is about quality. So for the quality, we use Veracode. So we do it for improving the quality and also comply with our AWS security policy. And what actually Veracode does, we upload our code to Veracode, and it actually checks if you don't make any strange coding mistakes, that opens vulnerabilities. But it also checks the third-party components that we are using, if they contain a vulnerability, yes or no. So we actually send it to Veracode. They perform their check, and in the end, we have indeed found some vulnerables. We fix them, we send them again, and in the end, we have like a green badge. That means that we are good. And when we are good, we actually receive the badge from Veracode, verified standard. And you can also have a look on their website as well, that we actually deserve it and that is checked properly. And hence it's from quality point of view, we are okay, we are safe for this release. We also have a component for is-deploy. So with 15.1 we released or 15.1.1 we released is-deploy 3.1.4. And that one actually contains a fix to make it easy for the updates that we currently have made for 15.1. So we have 15.1, update 1 and update 2. And also it now returns the right software version. If you do it on is-deploy on those versions with a update installed, it should also show you the correct software version. In 3.1.5, and this one is part of the Tridion Docs 15.2 release, we also make a change, and that mainly is for the enable is external preview and the disable is external preview. They are no longer working on a 15.2 instance. You could actually still execute them, but they will log a warning that external preview is no longer supported for version 15.2. But if you use this is the version of this on a lower version, it still does the job for enabling and disabling external preview. For is remote, so for if remote, there's no change compared to the 15.1.1. We still deliver is remote 8.1 as part of the CD layout, and everything can be automated indeed on the server with is remote 8.1 for Tridion Docs 15.2. And that brings us to the end of this bootcamp session. Thank you for attending it, and see you at the next sessions, once about the client tools and collective spaces. And we have another session as well for completely for organized space. Thank you very much.